Welcome back to Hell to Pay podcasts. I'm Elle.
And this is Amr.
And we are once again without Sipo. I've been the one constant. So, all the hardy haters out there, you're stuck with me again this week.
Hardy heads are rejoicing, though.
This week, we are talking about what I think is one of the funniest diplomatic incidents in modern history, but as well, something with a lot of very dark undertones to it. In May 1986, two of President Ronald Reagan's National Security Council advisors, Oliver North and Robert Bud McFarlane, touched down in Tehran on a secret diplomatic mission. With them was also a diplomat and a CIA agent who was acting as their translator. The four arrived on forged Irish passports, and they also had with them some military weapons parts. But more interestingly, they had 2 Colt pistols, a kosher chocolate cake in the shape of a key that they'd purchased en route to Tehran and Tel Aviv, and also a Bible with a handwritten verse signed by Ronald Reagan. So they get to the airport and they're spending an hour waiting around, and the only person there is like an airport staffer. And it starts dawning on these guys that, hang on, there's no official Iranian delegation coming to meet them. So some Iranian Revolutionary Guards turn up and take their pistols, and they also seized and ate the cake.
Was it a good cake? I wonder if it tasted good. I mean, if it came from Israel, it must have tasted like shit, to be fair, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it depends how fresh it was. I mean, it's not far, obviously, from Tel Aviv to Tehran. So if you could get it in some foil and keep it airtight.
Yeah, but what does even kosher cake even mean? Like, all the ingredients on a regular cake are fine.
It'd be something about the eggs and the milk, or maybe not mixing eggs and milk.
Yeah, maybe. Actually, that's a good point, yeah.
Eventually, a couple of low-level kind of bureaucrats and Iranian revolutionary guys turn up in like beat-up old cars and take them to this hotel where they meet their contact who had brokered the meeting, who was an Iranian businessman called Munucha Gorbanifar. And then that night, they're still waiting around, still no high-level Iranian officials like they'd been promised. And they couldn't even get enough food for the 4 of them, so Gorbanifar got his mum to make them dinner.
I enjoy that part because it's one of my favorite, film tropes when, the mafia boss is yelling at his mom to make, pasta for, a bunch of other mafia guys. It's classic. It's a classic thing. It's like in Casino. It's awesome.
Yeah, and if you've ever been fed by a Persian mother, you would not be complaining, because Persians are just incredible cooks, and they definitely do that cliched thing of being like, oh, you haven't eaten enough food, I'm just going to have to give you some more.
Yeah, doing that to, notorious war criminal Oliver North is kind of hilarious image.
Well, I mean, they were missing their cake, so they needed to, they were probably hangry.
Yeah.
The 4 of them spent the next 3 days holed up in this hotel room in Tehran. North is desperately trying to save this diplomatic mission. McFarlane's going, okay, come on, this is bullshit, we're not doing any more deals, and just trying to get them out of the country because they were starting to think, shit, we could become high-profile hostages or even be killed. And only later did the diplomat and the CIA agent find out that North and McFarlane had suicide pills with them that were given to them by the head of the CIA, William Casey, in the event that things went south. They hadn't given any to the functionaries. Oliver North had just kept saying, oh, everything's fine, it's fine, we've got an exit plan, don't worry. And they thought later on that the plan was just that the 2 high-ranking guys would kill themselves and leave, the guy who speaks Farsi and the guy who doesn't really have, much blood on his hands to deal with the Iranians.
I mean, it is an exit plan. They are exiting life, so...
On the tarmac, they're about to leave Tehran after 3 days, and North tries to cheer up McFarlane, that they hadn't reached this deal with the Iranians. And he tells him, at least we got money for the Contras. And this was a statement that really bewildered McFarlane. 5 months later, news of this failed diplomatic event was reported in Lebanese newspapers and soon made their way into the US press. And slowly it unraveled and journalists started putting together the pieces of what is now known as the Iran-Contra scandal, which wound up bringing down senior Reagan administration officials and almost the president himself. It even at one point, before McFarlane was due to give testimony, he tried to take his own life. I don't think with the suicide pills, though. I think they must have given those back.
Yeah, are you expected to give back those pills if you quit the CIA, if you tender your 2-week notice?
Yeah, they must have a not in America I think, but in Australia and stuff, police officers have to account for every bullet that they ever use.
Yeah.
I imagine it's like there's like a serial number and you're given like, 315 to 318 of the suicide pills and you've got to account for them and give them back at the end.
You gotta turn in your badge, your gun, and the little cyanide in the back of your teeth.
Yeah, well, I mean, everyone knows that you can make cyanide with apple seeds anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's not so much whether you can make it or not as having it handy in the case of like emergency. The funny thing is with these things, whenever people have like suicide pills, I'm like, would they do it? I always question if these agents have it in them to actually, go ahead, because I would let myself get captured, to be honest. I don't think I have it in me to take the pill.
Yeah, I mean, you'd want to like, could you just, you'd want to keep it under your tongue or something so long as it didn't dissolve, so you could just be like, okay, shit's getting real, and just swallow it.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that they're probably prepared on the other side to like pump your stomach or something if you start showing up that you're poisoned or whatever.
Yeah, but it's a quick poisoning. I mean, they'd have to have the machine ready to like pump your stomach like in minutes, because it's not one of those things where it takes hours to die. Yeah.
I love that you know this.
I studied chemistry and neuroscience in undergrad.
All right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I always forget that. Yeah, because you know about blood splatter patterns, you know how to clean up blood. You know how to make suicide pills.
And bombs. I know how to do that, but yeah.
How to cook a bomb in the kitchen of your mum. When McFarlane eventually did testify, he came clean about what he knew, and he gave this kind of bizarre interview to a television program as well. And he had all these regrets, he wanted to clarify all sorts of things, but on one thing he was very clear, and that's that bringing the kosher chocolate cake was Oliver North's idea. And he said, and I quote, "Simply put, there was a cake on the mission. I didn't buy it, bake it, cook it, eat it, present it, or otherwise get involved with it."
I did not have sex with that cake.
Going backwards a bit here, so just the background on how this whole thing became Iran-Contra. Obviously, and this is like extremely, extremely brief, they were a long-time American ally due to their massive oil reserves. They elected a socialist government in 1953. US launched a coup and reinstalled the royal family and ensured that the useless and corrupt Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, stayed in power up until 1979.
I wouldn't call Mossadegh socialist. I mean, he was a nationalist. He was a classic, like, one of those, like, Nasser type figures before Nasser.
Yeah.
Or, like, alongside Nasser, and that, like, he believed in the nationalization of certain industries and some welfare program, but he wasn't, like, explicitly socialist insofar as he didn't even really pursue close relationships with the Soviets or the Chinese, for that matter, which is always what dooms these people. Like, which, not that the Soviets are any good allies either. Like, most of them just wanted to die in their beds. And we've talked about this before. I usually, with someone like Mossadegh, I don't really consider him a socialist as such.
Yeah, that's very reasonable. And correct. And one of my favorite things about him, he was a massive hypochondriac.
Really?
Yeah,
I didn't know that. That's funny.
He kind of was like always, and so was Khrushchev, and he was always kind of lounging around in his pajamas, apparently, especially as things were, and kind of always being like, oh, I'm sick, oh, I've got cancer, call a doctor, whatever. And then, I think he kind of fell into this kind of malaise, and it was as things were getting worse, and it was a bit of a boy who cried wolf situation, I think. It's just one of those facts that's always kind of stuck in my head about him.
That is really funny. That is really hilarious.
Yeah, so that was Mossadegh, the leader that the US couped in 1953. But yeah, so the Iranian royal family's there, just becoming increasingly more corrupt. All the cliches, going off to Paris all the time and spending all the oil money on handbags and all that kind of shit. So after the Islamic Revolution throws out the Shah in sort of 1978-79, and the Ayatollah takes power, Jimmy Carter made a pretty, fatal error in that he let the Shah into the US for cancer treatment. I think even, Kissinger had been saying, don't do this. It's just going to inflame tensions. We need to try and, break bread with these new guys.
Yeah, because the Shah initially was expelled to Egypt, Sadat's Egypt, and it turned out he had cancer, and I assume the US was one of the few places that could treat him. And yeah, you're right, Kissinger, even Brzezinski was saying, don't take him, just stop. I don't. Carter is really weird because he has these moments of pure hayseed, what is he, a Jesuit of some kind or some sort of
He was an evangelical.
He was one of those evangelicals that are really into the whole helping other people bullshit. What is it? What's the fucking thing. Methodist? Was he a Methodist? I don't...
No, he was a Southern Baptist.
That's the one. He's a Southern Baptist. Yeah, he had that whole, like, Southern Baptist, like, sort of, we have to help people thing. And it came out in, like, it came out in the wrong times, which is always really funny to watch.
Yeah, I mean, his administration was just in such shambles by then. But yeah, one of the things, he became really obsessed. Like, he was the first US president to really get into human rights promotion overseas.
Yeah.
And so started tying a lot of things to this. So they actually stopped, like, funding some, like, evil regimes or, you know, sending money to bad people in some respects. But then it also, yeah, had all sorts of bizarre flow-on effects. And, you know, it's like corruption, right? You can frame human rights to kind of look like, or human rights violations to look like whatever you want.
Yeah.
If you've got the right motivations and the right contacts. And, yeah, that was something that kind of always undid him with foreign policy.
Well, he never got a handle on the freaks at the CIA and Foggy Bottom. Like, he would insist on human rights and stuff, and like the CIA guys would be like, yeah, sure, sir, yeah, whatever you say, sir, and then just go around him and do what they always do, which is, you know, he is underrated in terms of like his administration's evil, so to speak. Like Brzezinski was the one who fucking fomented the Afghan jihad. Like, It wasn't Kissinger's idea. That was entirely a Brzezinski thing.
Yeah, absolutely. There was so much as well, like competing foreign policies always going on in the US. You know, there's the Congress is always trying to wrestle back from the imperial presidency. The presidents, ever since Eisenhower, were consolidating the National Security Council and the CIA under them, and especially taking a lot of power away from the State Department. Then you've obviously got the State Department and the Secretary of State trying to do their thing. And then you've just got, you know, the cowboys in CIA stations and whatever all over the world, you know, still kind of, you know, running their own operations as well. So it's that very bizarre thing where the genie is so out of the bottle that just trying to put it back in, there's just so many different arms of the US empire around the world that no one can ever really keep a hold of them.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like one arm doesn't even know what the other arm is doing, yeah.
Yeah, and oftentimes that's willful, but not always, and there's always conflict and egos, and yeah, it's just the never-ending story of US empire. So the Shah's led into the US, and then students invade the US embassy in Tehran and take 53 hostages for 444 days. Carter becomes really obsessed by it. You know, he launches that really ill-fated rescue attempt, which is just too long to go into, but it was just a complete shambles. And up until the last night of his presidency, you know, when he's handing over on January 1981, the next day is Reagan's inauguration. Carter spent all night up on the phone trying to free the hostages. The next morning he's barely slept, he hasn't shaved, he's completely haggard. He didn't want this to be, you know, hanging over his legacy. And instead, the Iranians freed them about 2 hours after Reagan had been inaugurated.
Yeah, that is a big dunk on Carter. That is such a huge dunk.
I know. And he was just obviously devastated. And then so, you know, Ronnie, who's like done fuck all for it, but, you know, just gets to greet them and always be associated with bringing home the hostages, even though he very much didn't. And they you know, planned the timing. And so another thing obviously happening in Iran is that the next year, they wound up going to war with Iraq in, you know, this gruesome trench attrition warfare that the type of which hasn't really been seen since World War One.
Yeah, it is very interesting, that war, how it reverted to, like, you know, like you said, trench warfare, but also like massed artillery, shelling of cities, human wave attacks at some point too. Yeah,
we should do an episode or two on that sometime.
I'd be down.
Yeah. I mean, you probably know a lot more about that than me, but that is like, yeah, very fascinating.
My dad's co-worker was an Iraqi veteran of the Iraq-Iran war, and I remember hearing some interesting stories from him about, like, mowing down kids on bicycles in the morning and then being so exhausted that when the IRGC would attack in the afternoon, their positions would just get overwhelmed.
Gosh. I mean, it's so grim. I went to Iran years ago on holidays, and I wound up out with some friends in the middle of the desert south of Shiraz, like going towards the Afghan border, smoking opium that we bought from some like completely shell-shocked veterans of that war. and they just lived like hermits out in the desert and just smoked opium all day. They were just like completely fucked up from it.
Aussies are the most interesting travelers. They really are. It's just a fascinating thing. Like, no American or Brit would be like, let's go to Iran and smoke opium with, like, you know, essentially the Freikorps of Iran. It's hilarious.
Yeah, well, it's, you know, the joke is, that anywhere you go in the world, there's the random Australian there who's just been around for a while, not sure what they're doing there, not sure how long they're going to be there for. And that was me for a time.
It is interesting because I would argue that Australia has the infrastructure to be the best spy country in the world. Like, Australian travelers could really become, like, effective agents if Australia wishes to be this, like, you know, the octopus of information, if you will. But they don't. I don't know why. Mr. Albanese, sir. I think about that.
Albo. Yeah, if anyone ever looked at my passport, they probably would think I'm a spy. But also, if anyone, you know, ever has a drink with me, you know that I'll tell you everything I know after about half a glass of wine. And it would be completely useless. There was actually an Australian chick who was arrested in Iran a couple of years ago. I think she'd studied in Israel, and she was a, like, Persian language and Iranian politics expert.
Yeah, come on, man, come on.
Yeah.
What are we,
It was, and you know, was just, like, went to some conference in Tehran and was just walking around asking people really weird questions.
Where's the Boto clinic, mate? Where's the... I'm having a Boto, mate.
And, she got picked up, and they freed her after a few years, but, yeah, that was all very sus, and it's like, I think, Assad is not sending Australia its best people.
Yeah. Or Australia's not sending Mossad its best people, but yes.
So another thing that's happening in the world, I mean, 1979, just as a year, is like one of the most insane years in history. But Lebanon is also in the depths of a really horrible civil war that started in 1975, I believe. And by the early 80s, when the Israelis invade southern Lebanon, a new paramilitary group that's now known as Hezbollah formed. And they were really inspired by Iran and had, you know, really close ties with Iran fairly quickly, and they started taking Western hostages, just like the Iranians had. And most notably of those was the US CIA chief in Beirut, William Buckley, who was kidnapped in 1984, and I think they killed him after 444 days.
Yes, and you best believe he confessed everything before he got killed.
Yeah, I don't recommend it because it's pretty. I mean, just even reading about it is pretty horrible. But there were 3 videos sent to the CIA office in Athens of him being tortured, and there's like small photos and stuff of it online, and it will keep you up at night.
Yeah, they made him sing. I mean, to be fair though, being kidnapped by Hezbollah in '84, like when they first started, must be like seeing the Velvet Underground, you know, like the band before everything started kicking off, right? They really Absolutely. Are the Velvet Underground of anti-US resistance. Yeah,
the Banana album.
Yeah.
In the Beirut Hilton, yeah. And shortly after these kidnappings start happening, a Mossad intermediary contacts the US government saying that they have had contacts with moderates in the Iranian government who'd be keen to broker a deal to get back hostages if the US will sell them weapons, because the US had placed them under a weapons embargo, and that was causing them a lot of harm in the war against Iraq.
Yeah, it's not just weapons embargo. The biggest harm was that up until like the Shah was overthrown, obviously Iran was a US client state, and its air force was entirely equipped with American fighter jets, and the maintenance of those jets was done by American engineers and mechanics using American parts. And the embargo basically grounded Iran's air force. Even after the Islamic Republic gave amnesty to the Air Force officers, the Shah's Air Force officers, many of whom were arrested and were awaiting like trial or sentenced to prison for being part of the Shah's military. The Air Force was the most loyal of the branches to the Shah. Even after basically Iran did what Stalin did with the Tsarist officers during World War II and released them, there were still issues that were never really resolved with the Iranian Air Force just not having enough parts and maintenance. Like the planes were kept up with like duct tape and like just DIY MacGyvering. But yeah, the embargo hit their air power the hardest.
Yeah, and that was actually so some of the goods that Oliver North and Bud McFarlane took with them was some of these parts, but not enough to like really keep them going. But as a gesture of goodwill, along with the chocolate cake, was bringing some parts, saying, yeah, look, this, like, you know, trying to offer them a carrot and saying, we'll give you the rest of these parts if you know, can make this deal happen. So the intermediary has contacted Mossad. Mossad's contacted the Americans, and someone takes this plan to President Reagan. He's actually recovering from abdominal surgery, and some of his more sober cabinet members are saying, no, do not do this. It's terrible. It's illegal. It's got disaster written all over it. He was really keen on the idea because he was the man who freed the hostages from the embassy. And if he can get back, you know, the CIA station chief, Reverend Benjamin Weir, some journalists who are over there, you know, he's going to be a national hero, and he wants to be that guy.
Yeah, Reagan really was the first, like, television president, the first guy who just liked being on TV. Also the first of the like pure senile presidencies. But yeah, we can get into like culpability later as to what Reagan knew, because, you know, there are claims that he was just counting jelly beans on the table while other people ran these operations.
We'll definitely get into that later on. So again, while all this is happening, in 1979, only months after the Iranian Revolution, left-wing insurgency, the Sandinistas, took power in Nicaragua after an uprising against the Somoza dynasty that had ruled since the 1930s. And they were, you know, just horrible, horrible family, right-wing kleptomaniacs, all of the stuff that had always had tacit US support. So President Carter, when the Sandinistas took over, sent them $99 million in aid as a gesture of goodwill, you know, saying, you can still do business with the Americans. And straight away they basically said, fuck you, and joined the Soviet sphere and began getting Soviet weapons shipped to them via Cuba. And the Sandinistas then started sending on some of these weapons to left-wing insurgents in El Salvador, which was in the midst of its own bloody civil war, which was led by this all-time villain, Roberto d'Orbison, who was the death squad leader who the next year would go on to murder Archbishop Oscar Romero.
You know that old Stalin quote, how many divisions does the Pope have? I always think about that when I think about Oscar Romero, because, like, a serious Vatican would have sent, like, the Swiss Guard to gut Robert de Bussion.
Oh, that's... Sorry, I got butchered the pronunciation.
Yeah, I did sound French, but yeah.
Yeah, his father was French.
Yeah, always bad blood there, always poor genetic component. But, you know, if you're killing an archbishop, even if you don't agree with the archbishop, they're putting hands on a man of God. If you're the Pope and you're serious, you should be sending your Swiss Guard there. Yeah.
I mean, it also just shows the blatancy of, you know, because that's a very pious country, and just how much, you know, people were just so beaten down that, you know, they weren't even really worried that there was going to be some mass uprising for killing, you know, the beloved capital's archbishop, who's being canonized. Well, he's in the process. That was one of Pope Francis's last kind of things, was getting him in the canonization process.
Yeah.
And weirdly, he was Opus Dei, which, like, he was like kind of Opus Dei and kind of liberation theology, just a kind of bizarre dude.
We call that dialectical synthesis.
I don't know, yeah, it's probably not a bizarre dude. Like, he's a very interesting guy, and I think
the left and right wing of the Opus Dei. The Strasser right wing and the Himmler right wing of the Opus Dei.
So when Reagan takes office in 1981, he cuts off funding to the Sandinistas because he says that they were supporting the overthrow of, inverted commas, democracy in El Salvador. And then also a right-wing coalition, you know, that was there. There were obviously remnants of the regime in Nicaragua, and, you know, all sorts of people who didn't want the left taking over. You know, very, very conveniently kind of coalesced with, you know, when Reagan really got the CIA to amp up operations in Nicaragua, which I cannot say. My pronunciation is horrible. And this is all part of the emerging, what became known as the Reagan Doctrine, which was, we're just going to promote democracy everywhere. And so that was basically also able to turn them from saying, okay, not only are the Sandinistas supporting rebels in El Salvador, but we could also overthrow them themselves because they are not democratic. The Democrats in Congress started realizing what was up, and there was a real wing in the 70s, particularly, of the Democrats in Congress who were really big on human rights and looking at this stuff, and, you know, it was fairly genuine. There's always going to be carve-outs and all sorts of things, but there was certainly a core of people who were like, this doesn't seem right. And so they still had a majority of Congress, so they were able to pass over the next couple of years two pieces of legislation, what's known as the Boland Amendments, which aimed to stop what they knew that Imperial Reagan presidency was doing via the CIA, which was essentially conducting an illegal foreign war and certainly an illegal foreign policy in Central America.
Isn't it hilarious? Honestly, though, like, even as ineffective as it ended up becoming, like, eventually, like, it sort of deteriorated. Like, comparing the Democrats of that era to, like, Hakeem Jeffries and Nancy Pelosi, like, they wouldn't even imagine, they wouldn't even conceptualize in their wildest dreams something like the Church Committee or the Boland Amendment or any way in which they can use Congress and their role to, like, push back against the imperial presidency. Like, whatever else, the Democrats of that era still had some ability to, like, do politics, to utilize power, to... And obviously, obviously Carter was Brzezinski was the one who was fucking enabling the Mujahideen in Afghanistan initially, and, like, they're not good, there's not moral good, it's just the ability to resist Republican encroachment and to play dirty in politics doesn't even exist anymore. That's so depressing.
I mean, Nancy Pelosi was the insider trader par excellence, and so I think she was busy with all of that kind of stuff, or just, tamping down on the left in her own party. But yeah, it really occurs to me, because I've been doing so much writing about Congress in the 70s, in particular for my forthcoming book on the Moonies, and just how much more substantial the figures were. So to even a fairly minor congressperson, so many of them were war veterans, were, people who'd come up in the, through the Great Depression and had to have, left school and start working at 10 or something like that, and then educated themselves, worked 3 jobs to go through law school and all this kind of thing. Just much more substantial, principled people.
Yeah,
and, it's said a lot, but the professional political class today is just so fucking hollow.
It's actually interesting you mentioned that. I think there's a very appropriate parallel with, like, film, right? The old directors, the old big film directors, such as they were guys who, were veterans of wars and, like, had to work and, like, etc. Today, it's the same thing between the politics and the film industry, where it's just, like, nepo babies and, like, guys who just went straight from, private school to posh college to the career that they were designed to get from a young age. There was no effort to really, move around that.
I mean, it comes back to a theme we've talked about a bit, which is, like, yeah, you need, like, friction to create good art. And whether that's you don't have any money, or you're from, an oppressed minority or something like that, just having it, having the kind of white glove treatment in any kind of career just seems to create bad cohorts, I suppose.
Yeah.
So yeah, Reagan has got his administration finding loopholes in the Boland Amendments. And one of them was that they realized that the National Security Council, which had really been consolidated president by president underneath the president, and as I mentioned earlier, was, really apart from the oversight of all these other agencies, they were able to use the National Security Council, which was led, one of his chief advisors was Bud McFarlane, and they had a young Turk working for them, Oliver North, and he was a Marine in Vietnam. He'd never had any training in covert operations, anything like that. He was just a soldier. And they put North under McFarlane in charge of the operations to get these weapons to the Contras as their way of circumventing Congress. The only problem was that money was a real issue. It's not cheap, I suppose, to get weapons out to people, and everyone, of course, is clipping the ticket. Certainly in the US, various brokers that they need to get them along the way, all of these Contra groups, everyone's just skimming money and weapons for themselves off the top, so it's just becoming exponentially more expensive. So another part of a loophole that they were able to find was that no funding was supposed to be coming from, the US government. But they were like, okay, well, they didn't say anything about third parties or about foreign governments. So they start soliciting private donations from very right-wing groups in the US who are interested. But obviously, people who have the big money spigots are foreign governments. So they start hitting up Saudi Arabia, Israel, Taiwan, all their friends in anti-communist circles. And also the Sultan of Brunei, who hilariously sent, I think it was $10 million, but Oliver North's secretary had written down the account number incorrectly, and so it wound up in some guy's bank account in Switzerland.
Nice.
And he reported it. He didn't take off into the sunset. He actually reported.
Moron. Just take the money and go.
I mean, I guess if, like, it's obviously a Swiss bank account, so I think he was actually some sort of financial dude, so that was probably just chump change to him.
Yeah, plus I assume it's not worth the cost of, like, alienating the Sultanate of Brunei or whatever.
Yeah, or just, like, the paperwork. I imagine if you, like, fucked that up and the US came after you, they would drown you in paperwork.
Yeah.
So how we get the hyphen, I suppose, in Iran-Contra, how it all comes together. The first weapons deal with Iran, potentially in exchange for, well, hopefully in exchange for hostages, starts taking place in 1985. And North is, he got money from the Saudis, the Sultan of Brunei, still needs more and more money. And so he has the bright idea of, why don't we bring together these two illegal foreign policies that we're running out of the president's office? His bright idea is we can overcharge the Iranians for weapons, because I guess, I don't know how much, Iranians just say, how much is this? And you tell them, it's like when someone asks you for a cigarette outside the pub. And you can just be like, yeah, that's $1, when they could just go down the road and buy it for buy themselves a whole packet for $7.
I live by a code. I think every man needs to live by a code. And part of my code is that I never take money for cigarettes. Like, if someone asks me for a cig, even outside of a pub, or if it's a homeless guy or whatever, it's like, no, boy, stop giving me change. Like, to take the cig. Like, if I'm giving you poison, the money you give me is tainted money, so I do not need it on my conscience. Yeah, well,
I very much agree with you. I mean, look, I don't smoke anymore, but in Australia, cigarettes are taxed so much that they're probably about $40 a packet.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, so people...
We need to, President Trump, sir, please liberate Australia from its communist regime.
Because no one wants, people have a few drinks, then no one wants to buy a packet. So they're always trying to steal them from, like, the few people left who smoke.
That's brutal.
Yeah.
That is brutal, yeah.
So the US is trying to overcharge the Iranians for weapons. Well, Olive North has this bright idea. And then they can use the surplus money to fund the Contras. And so how the whole scheme was going to work. So they, obviously still couldn't sell arms directly to Iran, the great enemy who was under this embargo. So they're like, okay, well, we'll just sell extra to Israel, and then Israel will sell them on to Iran and give us the money. So, all sounds relatively straightforward. Whenever you think about efficiency in, like, military and intelligence stuff, like, you always think, oh yeah, Israel's really top of the league, dead-eyed, cold-hearted, just get shit done, guys who have been learning Persian since they were 5, so that they may one day be able to go behind enemy lines in Tehran and do something. But the Israelis were, like, just completely kept fucking up everything that they touched.
Where did that reputation come from? Because I guess aside from, like, maybe Entebbe, like, Entebbe was a good operation for the Israelis, but even then, they lost the fucking guy, and they lost Netanyahu's older brother, so I don't know. It seems to me that the Israelis were always, like, comically inept with their intelligence, really.
Yeah, I mean, we could do so many things on Mossad. And I mean, they're probably listening right now. Hello. But yeah, so they were, I mean,
guys,
even
you have a lot of money. Please subscribe to our Patreon. Come on.
Substack. It's a Substack.
Yes.
I mean, they even, I mean, down to the Iranian businessman that they put in touch with Oliver North that kicked this whole thing off. I mean, the guy who did that and said, oh, yeah, he's credible, was the deputy head of Mossad at the time. And, I mean, one thing I didn't actually mention was that the CIA already had this guy, like, a file on this Iranian businessman, Ghorbanifar, and it said, like, he's a serial pest, he's a nuisance, he fabricates intelligence, he's always coming up to us and telling us that he's got, this grand plan, and just stay clear of him. He's just, he's a nutter. And when the Mossad brought this guy to the US and they looked at the file and they're like, oh yeah, he's a serial pest, and Oliver North and everyone and Reagan just wanted this to happen so badly that they were like, oh no, it's fine. I mean, the Israelis vouch for him now. He's cool. He can come in.
Oh my God.
And so, I mean, just this whole Iranian operation is just a complete farce. So, for starters, the surplus that's meant to be going to the Contras is going to Ghorbanifar, another Israeli broker, infamous Saudi weapons dealer and broker, Adnan Khashoggi.
We should have, like, a soundtrack thing that plays every time we mention Adnan Khashoggi in any one of our episodes. Like a theme song situation.
Yeah, I mean, and we definitely have to do the ICC bank that he had a lot to do with as well.
The BCCI, you mean?
BCCI, ICC.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about cricket. Yeah, BCCI. He was waist deep in that as well. And so, there's one shipment that gets stuck in Portugal because the Portuguese authorities got sus, and they're saying, well, if you're saying it's government, it should have this paperwork. And they're like, oh, no, it's not government. They're like, well, we're not letting you do private arms dealing through us. So then they have to get the guy who was doing the flights to send weapons to the Contras in Nicaragua. Fuck me, I can't say it.
God damn it!
It's one of those, it sends me into a
Nicaragua.
It's Nicaragua. Not... I don't know. I just get so tongue-tied. I'll just, I need a soundboard and I'm just going to hit Nicaragua. See, I'm doing it again.
No, that was good. That was good. Yeah, okay.
And so they get him to get a CIA front airline to rescue this shipment stuck in Portugal. And then they finally get it, and there's all these other problems. They finally get it to Iran. And then the Iranians open the shipment. It's less than they'd ordered. They were the wrong kind of missiles. And then some of them had the Star of David painted on them.
Famously something that the Iranians really like to see.
Yeah. Imagine if they it kind of would have been a bit of a good psyop on Saddam Hussein. He would have lost his shit if he's
Well, that was annoying. The Iranians should have used those missiles, disabled some of them such that when they dropped they wouldn't explode, and then Saddam would launch his missiles on Tel Aviv. Get Israel involved in the war for real.
Yeah, or you just say, look, we've got the Israelis on our side now. You're fucked. You've got to surrender. Yeah. And then, so the Iranians were furious about that, but then they also just kind of kept moving the goalposts. So they only released one hostage, which is Reverend Benjamin Weir, who I mentioned earlier. So he's finally released in September 1985. And Ghorbanifar, the intermediary, the Iranian businessman, just keeps changing the terms, saying, oh, you've got to send more, and then once we get them all, then we can talk again about the hostages. But we can't guarantee anything because, we don't have them. That's Hezbollah. They're just these guys that look up to us. And for whatever reason, the US kept... I think it was just kind of sunk cost fallacy, but they just kept going along with it and kept, sending Iran shipments of weapons.
Yeah, the Reagan administration is so interesting in that, they keep going along even when they're being strung along by someone. They keep just being okay, sure. It's very much like a murderer's row of evil morons.
Yeah, certainly. It's just the whole thing was so outrageous, and anyone with half a brain on them was saying, don't do this, just distancing themselves from it. Caspar Weinberger and George Shultz and guys like that who, are no angels. And, I think to be, in any level of US government in foreign policy, you've got to be a pretty cynical bastard, especially back then. But even these guys were just this is absurd. And then so obviously this whole just rolling disaster of the weapons for hostages deal comes to a head. And so in May 1986, North and McFarlane get on their plane and head out to Tehran. And actually, by then, McFarlane had retired from his role as the National Security Advisor. And his successor, Poindexter, which is just the funniest name, and it's just such an American name.
You really need to change your name if you're called Poindexter.
I know. I asked him to go as an emissary, to prove to the Iranians how serious they were and that this had presidential assent. It wasn't just Cowboy Oliver North doing this whole thing, because I guess, the Iranians weren't stupid, and when they saw these clown intermediaries, they obviously thought it was some sort of hoax or just a complete, freelancing. And so they really wanted to show the Iranians that, we're deadly fucking serious.
Yeah.
Then in October 1986, the operation, literally comes crashing down when one of the CIA planes that was flying weapons to the Contras in Nicaragua was shot down, and the one remaining crew member, Eugene Hassenfuss, another great American name, was captured by the Sandinistas. It obviously just blew up this huge scandal that, okay, the CIA is clearly doing a covert and illegal foreign policy, and arguably a foreign war in their neighbor in the South. See how I gracefully avoided saying Nicaragua again? In America's backyard.
Yeah, you should start doing the classic New York Times or any newspaper where you mention the country once and then it's the Latin American country, the country in America's backyard. Yeah, I would avoid using. I would avoid trying to pronounce this because after your butchering of Nicaragua, We're trying to be a respectable podcast here. We're trying to get an audience here.
I know. So the next month, the Lebanese newspapers broke the story about the Iranian arms deal and about the ill-fated cake trip to Tehran. And the US papers picked up on it and slowly began joining the dots, largely because, who's this Oliver North figure that's showing up in, both of these covert foreign policy operations? Isn't that a little bit bizarre? And so a couple of weeks later, North was found to be having what was called a shredding party to destroy the evidence in his office. And his secretary, Fawn Hall, who had this, the most 80s hairstyle you've ever seen. She kind of became this national figure because she was quite glamorous. And her mother was actually McFarlane's secretary as well. And so she tried to smuggle out all of these documents in her bra that they weren't able to shred in time.
Respect. I respect that.
She was, I think you'd, I think you'd find she's a bit of a fox. And then, of course, the problem was, again, North was a soldier. He was an ideologue. He wasn't trained in anything, and he didn't really have any, office or political experience. So he's shredded all these documents, and then they've realized that he's just got all the copies, and the hard copies are elsewhere. And so it was just kind of all completely, pointless. And so Reagan has to then go on TV and, does his I know nothing, no one told me, this is really bad. And, Oliver North is watching this broadcast and finds out that he's on the hook for criminal charges. Reagan's we're going to put the full force of the law down on these cowboys. And this results in Poindexter and some other senior administration officials resigning as well. So then, America being America, every, congressperson's launching their own investigation and their own committee. And then there was a thing called the Tower Commission that was launched. And there were these kind of ongoing, long, open investigations with Oliver North and Fawn Hall and the whole cast and crew testifying, on TV because, once again, it's America. And the really interesting coda, apart from the outcome that everyone that was involved managed to get suspended sentences. I mean, in the case of McFarlane, he got community service. North had all these serious charges and 3 convictions, and he looked certain for jail, and then it was overturned on a technicality. Everyone else got, suspended sentences or were pardoned. And
they were really pardoned by HW, weren't they?
Yeah, because this is right towards the end of Reagan's administration.
Yeah.
But the really interesting thing was there was a ton of public polling done at the time. And, sort of before, during and after all of the investigations and the hearings, that it was pretty consistent, generally about 60%, 2/3 of the American public were just get over this thing and move on. We're sick of hearing about it. It's gone on too long. People are making too big of a deal out of it. And I guess the theory kind of is that Americans were so weary from Vietnam and then from Watergate. Part of Reagan was kind of this aspirational president in that people, and also just the disaster of the Carter years. And, people just wanted dignity and confidence restored to the office of the president. They wanted the movie star who was handsome, who said, the right things in the sonorous voice, the glamorous wife, and who was just America's great. We're gonna be strong. Commie's bad. All that kind of stuff. And also, I think just because it's really complex to understand, especially at the time when it was coming out in dribs and drabs. So yeah, American people are just fuck it. Who cares? Just get on with it.
I think more than that, I don't want to be death to America, Mark Bar America, etc. But I remember seeing polls after the My Lai massacre, where the majority of Americans supported the soldiers. They didn't want the soldiers from My Lai charged. It's not so much that they were exhausted even from Vietnam. It seems to me that the American public writ large, with a few exceptions, after 1968 just sort of bought entirely into the American imperial project. So we'll butcher people, we'll kill people, we'll ruin these countries across the globe. People will be immiserated from El Salvador to Vietnam to wherever. But with few exceptions and few pockets of resistance, most Americans just sort of accepted that as the cost for their relatively affluent lifestyles, their suburban white picket fence, car, etc., that kind of thing. Which is ironic because the ultimate conclusion was always going to be NAFTA. Once you accept the cost of empire, it's always going to come back and when it comes back with a vengeance. And, the whole suburban, comfortable affluence will always be on fragile grounds, especially after the Soviet Union's collapse. But I don't know. It's like I look at the way the public reacted to Reagan, right? And like I connect it to like to Milai, to El Mozote, to all of that, and it's just, to me, it's not even that like the American public is irredeemable. It's just, this is what happens when you're a citizen of the metropole. This is the deal you make with yourself. I don't know. Maybe I'm being too cynical here, but yeah.
No, I agree with you. And I think, that's certainly a part of it. I think that there is a pretty sizable majority of Americans who believe that their safety is guaranteed by American adventures abroad, and that things can be justified in keeping America safe. And that the worst kind of excesses, they can happen, but our boys, wouldn't do it, or they would only do it because they were keeping us safe. It's just been a huge part of the American ethos since World War II.
Yeah, it's really depressing, and I don't see how to fix that. I don't see how to get enough Americans to care about their country's indiscretions abroad. I mean, even now with Palestine and everything, like, yes, the majority of Americans are against Israel in some vague, amorphous way, but like, are they, like, if someone like Bernie were to run again, or AOC, I do imagine the majority of Americans would, turn their noses, how do you say, accept the problematic or otherwise waffling of someone like AOC in exchange for a more comfortable domestic social welfare, if you will.
It's hard to say. I mean, I think that there is pretty broad support for Israel now, and I would largely, I mean, I just think it's really a post 9/11 thing, that they say, okay, yeah, they're doing to you in Israel what they did to us in New York, and so that there is this kind of understanding that's basically just rooted in like anti-Arab and anti-Islam.
Yeah, it is the long tail of 9/11. Which the interesting thing, by the way, going back to this, is it's not even just the American polling, like just wanting to move on from this, but like I do think that Watergate was probably the last time that like being part of the executive and doing crimes led to actual consequences. Like the actual people in charge were facing consequences. Like, granted, not enough, by the way. Like, I don't think impeachment, they should have stopped impeachment. Like, Nixon should have been in jail. But I do think that like the whole, like, the lack of consequences going up to like Reagan and HW in particular is what set the stage in America for the complete disdain for legal forms and for, following the rules, if you will, that you saw, for example, with the 2000 election, with 9/11, with the Iraq War in particular. Like, a lot of people criticize Obama for not persecuting the people involved with the Iraq War, like, your Cheneys, your Rumsfelds, etc. But, like, that was baked in once HW pardoned all those people. Like, once HW set the precedent that it's okay to just avoid legal, legislative, oversight and just do what you want, and like the executive will take care of you. Like, you could draw a through line from HW pardoning the Iran-Contra people all the way to Trump pardoning all of his friends when he got back in power. Like, that's a direct line right there.
Yeah, well, I mean, even from Gerald Ford pardoning Nixon and the Watergate guys, and I mean, it is crazy. Like, I think there was definitely a weariness, and people are like, well, we can't prosecute every president for their crimes, after Watergate. It's like, oh, this is a bad look. But also, I think Iran-Contra is like orders of magnitude worse than Watergate. Like, Watergate was just, just paranoid buffoonery. I mean, this is just complicity in so much global bloodshed and immiseration, and, not to mention, just running, cowboy foreign policies with absolutely no oversight, and, a fair amount of buffoonery as well, obviously.
And arming the guys who are like raping nuns and beheading children and things of that nature in Nicaragua. Yeah,
just some of the worst human beings on the planet in those death squads. And just all in the name of making sure that United Fruit or whatever doesn't have to give up a bit of their land to some poor indigenous peasants.
Yeah.
So just to round it out, so Reagan's popularity definitely took a pretty big hit from this. And I mean, he undoubtedly lied when he went on TV and was like, it was Oliver North, I didn't know anything. But then after all of these commissions, it came out that very clearly he did. And so he did, just one of my favorite, just like nothing speak sound bites. He did this televised address to the nation. And he said, "A few months ago, I told the American people I did not trade arms for hostages. My heart and my best intentions tell me that's true. But the facts and evidence tell me it's not."
That is, that's one of my favorite Reaganisms because I've used that before in my own life. I do imagine there's someone somewhere who would be able to use that and say, "A few months ago, I told my girlfriend that I did not cheat on her. My heart and my best intentions tell me that's true, but the fact and the evidence tell me it's not."
Yeah. But the pregnancy tests and the STD result tell me it's not.
And the video of me with my coworker at lunch or whatever.
Yeah, you know what? It's actually, that line is up there with my favorite political thing, which was Tony Blair when they signed the Good Friday Peace Accord. And he said, "Today is not a day for sound bites, but I feel the hand of history on my shoulder."
Yeah, I'm sorry, but the IRA should have killed him right there and then.
Yeah.
This is why I genuinely do enjoy Trump, because like all of these other people, like the way they construct their sentences, you can tell like they're trying
focus
to
grouped
like,
and
what?
It's been focus grouped already ahead of time.
Group, yeah, but also like they all they think about is like the Nobel Prize or whatever, like Oxford, Cambridge style like rhetoric they've learned or whatever it is. Like it's very like contrived, like what the fuck is my heart and my best intention tell me that's true, but the fact that you have to tell me it's not. Like it is just so awful. Whereas like things like I'll continue to drink that garbage, like that's just off the dome. That's a guy who knows things are gonna land. Like awesome. I love him. I genuinely love his rhetorical skill.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely has, as a number of people have observed, he does just have the kind of cadence and the timing and just the phrasing of like a stand-up comic.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's just also a man
so
whose entire like life's intellectual consumption is just television. So he has that kind of late night comic aspect to him.
Yeah, it's just to me, it's way better and more honest than like Reagan or Blair or like, Nixon even. Nixon was the exception, I will say. Like Nixon did have Trump's manners in a way,
Yeah, I mean, he could kind of, he did high and low quite well.
Yeah.
He could, kind of manage up, manage down. Hey, I've got to tell you, what one of my weird theories in life is? So you know how a few years ago Bob Dylan got the Nobel Prize for Literature?
Yeah.
For his songs, and it's like, I like Bob Dylan, who doesn't? But, and then, people were sort of reading out some of his worst lyrics and whatever and having a chuckle about it. I always suspected that Obama really, really wanted to get the Nobel Prize for Literature for his speeches.
Yes, I wouldn't be surprised if that, like, deliberately he wanted that. I mean,
and the committee spaffed too early by giving him the Peace Prize when he got elected.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, I think it's John Favreau or whoever, the Pod Johns who wrote his speeches, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, I think he had a pretty solid hand in them himself, because he certainly had that, who's that poet Amanda Gorman, I think it is, that has that way that kind of that very, very liberal way that people think is like clever of talking, how he was always, that was his kind of shtick first off, it's we shouldn't have red or blue states, we should have purple states because we're the United States. And, just all of those like, trying to make this, look at this contradiction and now look at it disappear.
Yeah.
With the power of words.
The most toxic presidency of the modern era, many are calling it.
Many such cases.
Many
people are saying this.
Yeah.
Look, I think we can wind up there. I mean, obviously, there is, I suppose just one further coda that there were a lot of people close to him, including his family, that I think close to Reagan and his family, that I don't know if it's a rewriting of history, if hindsight's 2020, that was saying, when he was making these decisions, Dad wasn't quite himself around then, and we were, thinking he wasn't quite all there, he was a bit foggy or disjointed, and then, people said, because he was diagnosed in 1994 with Alzheimer's, that he might have been showing signs of it back then. But I mean, like I said, his whole thing was, I'm the guy who gets hostages back, and we're not letting any lefties in our backyard. And everyone around him knew that and also believed that. So even if, like you said, he was counting jelly beans on the desk, he's still culpable.
He's culpable in a very interesting way. He reminds me a lot of like Biden, and to an interesting degree, he has the same thing as Fetterman as well. Like, I don't know if you read the recent Fetterman article.
Yeah.
But, like, it is, like they are, like, drooling, senile, like, their brains have turned to mush. But, like, with the one policy, the one issue, in Biden and Fetterman's case, Israel, in Reagan's case, like, anti-communism, you could see their brain just light up. Like, the remaining neurons just there, ready to, like, it's almost like the animal part of their brain. They're just, like, their eyes, like, turn like the Terminator, and they're like, yes, I will do everything in my power to keep this thing going.
Yeah, absolutely. And, yeah, just even if they were completely out of it, this was their stated policy for a long time. This was the rules. This is the ideology everyone knew about, and it's the kind of stuff that they got elected on. And so yeah, I just don't think his state of mind matters at all.
Yeah, well, yeah. I hope not to be too cynical, but I did hope he suffered a prolonged suffering before he died. He deserves the suffering.
I mean, by the sounds of it, he wouldn't have even known if he was really suffering at the end, because I think he was pretty far gone for a while. But yeah, that is. I think it's one of the funniest diplomatic incidents, the whole Tehran airport affair, but obviously just overlaid over the top of some of the most grim, disgusting episodes of American empire.
Yeah, a real microcosm of both the tragedy and the farce of the American imperium.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. Please subscribe to our Substack and leave a rating, review, and tell your friends. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye.